Hello. Reflecting on the ways that we don't understand each other in general in life, and the ways that that leads to resentment before we've even had a chance to think something through. How hard it is to stay positive when a seed of resentment, which comes from a seed of feeling misunderstood, creeps in. And most misunderstandings, I believe, as sad as perhaps this is to say, or as sad as this maybe is to hear, and I'm talking mostly to future me, but maybe anyone else who needs to hear this. Like, I just got an email that made me sad. And this person meant no ill will whatsoever. In fact, they used the word persnickety, like they know they're being a bit persnickety. And then they asked some very detailed questions, all of which would maybe have been answered if, and this is not a criticism of them, just an accurate fact. And normally passive aggressiveness comes from thinking those thoughts as criticisms. But an accurate fact is this person did not take the time to read the information that was available about a particular situation. And in not having taken the time to read it, or to understand me, or to understand philosophies behind the thing that we were discussing, because they had not taken the time, and it was laid out quite clearly in addition to ways that they could find the information, because they had not taken the time to do any research, their questions, which were accurately assessed by them as persnickety, left me with a feeling before I had a chance to stop the feeling. And that feeling is one that is on a spectrum. It's one that can be small, like an irritation. Like, darn it, I was in a good mood and now I'm irritated by this. And I believe this is how people get in bad moods for entire days or weeks or months or years. It can start as like a seed of irritation. And that irritation of, what? Why didn't they just read blah, 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 can grow if you're not careful. And it can be and so instead of fanning it, growing it into something that's a bigger deal, capital B, capital D, big deal. If instead of fanning it into righteous anger of, well, they could have done X, Y, and Z, if instead you just see it as like, well, first of all, you could even say, like, what are all the times that I don't do any research and I just say whatever I want and ask whatever questions I want, and yes, the information is out there if I wanted to look for it, or even it was told to me where it is and I didn't do the work. And how many times does that happen? And maybe for some people it happens a lot less. But even that comes from experience, learned experience of knowing that we don't want to be a burden to people because we know what it feels like to be burdened, which is learned experience. Or maybe we were a burden for a while and then we woke up to it and we're like, oh my gosh, I was really intense for people. So that seed of irritation, like, I guess I'm reflecting on, where do bad moods come from? Say you're in a great mood, you woke up on the right side of the bed and you're in a great mood. Bad moods come from these ridiculously tiny seeds of things. And I actually think it's easier to deal with a bad mood when it comes from an obvious place. This is a very, very heavy thing to say and to transition to after what I just said. But for instance, when my grandmother passed away, my final grandparent, and she and I had become very close. She's the one who was a nun. When she passed away, of course I went through a pretty intense grief process. But I am not kidding when I say, and as hard as this used to be for me to come to understand, that was easier for me to manage. Those types of intense feelings were easier for me to manage than other ones that I didn't understand as well. And I came to realize that the reason that was so much easier to manage is because grief is something everyone understands, including me. Like, you're supposed to be sad and you feel sad, and it's very direct, it's very straightforward. Sadness is sad. Losing someone is sad, and it's hard. And so I understood how process worked by then, because I had worked through so many things, including things she had helped me work through. And so I understood process. So I knew that I was going to feel a whole wide range of things, and then I did. And that was so on the nose. It was so straightforward that, you know, you just can't. And yes, I haven't lived through tragedies. Well, I've lived through social tragedies, like having no home during 9/11 because my house was in the zone you weren't allowed to go to, because I lived like a mile away from it when it happened. I lived in the Lower East Side on Cherry Street. Anyway, so in some ways, you know, the unknown is what makes it confusing. Like, say you get in a bad mood and you don't really fully remember that email you read that had that language, and then maybe you think thoughts like, well, I shouldn't make a big deal out of this because they weren't being mean. They were just being persnickety. And also, I shouldn't make a big deal out of this because we're coming at life from such different perspectives, and I understand and appreciate and respect their perspective. So shouldn't I not feel anything bad? But all of that removes you from the original source of the irritation. Like, but you do feel something bad. But you are feeling weird about it. So, you know, and then because of that shame and guilt that's in whatever you're feeling, a lot of people kind of disassociate or distance themselves from that original point of irritation. And then we forget, like, what even caused the bad mood. And then if that goes on, if that's how you react to life after months and years, wouldn't it make sense that you just kind of get generally grumpy? Like, you become a generally grumpy person? Because there's always going to be things to set you off. Me too. Like, and mine maybe isn't grumpiness, but mine used to be a lot of like anxiety or irritation or frustration at being unappreciated despite my best efforts. That's probably my biggest trigger, is when I feel unappreciated. So how far have I come that I can just put videos all over YouTube, knowing that for most people it's not only not appreciated, it's just not even watched. And that gave me sort of like a space and a freedom to develop this channel however I needed to develop it, whatever it needed to be. I was able, in the absence of people's keen and close up in my face observation and or possible criticism that I maybe would have sensed, you know, by knowing that most people I know or love just straight up don't watch it, because, you know, if you know me, you don't need this. I talk like this in person too. So it's a weird, and not to say that they all need me, but just to say, like, this wouldn't add value to their lives. Even if this way that I talk adds value to their lives, they would just do it with me in person. So it was a weird kind of journey to come to that realization, and to shed a lot of frustration or expectation or bitterness or sadness or irritation or feeling invisible or whatever other feelings you can feel when you become yourself. Especially if you become something or someone as specific as I am. Specifically weird, but also just specific. You know, when you start doing one thing regularly in a way that could easily be judged. So I'm coming up on this cute little area. I think I recently realized this area is not called Centertown, it's called Washington Square. And this is right where I met, well, I didn't meet him. I met him when he was working at Jumpin' Java, which is a coffee shop downtown, but that was his old apartment. And there's a thrift store and a little restaurant called Stan's. And there's like a dog shop. Now there's like the Bodie Juice Company, but it wasn't there when we were first dating. 2014. And there's like an old-fashioned pharmacy. Anyway, it's just like this cute little one-block downtown strip with like the best thrift store and a really good meat market, Frank's Meat Market, and then a restaurant called Stan's. And yeah, and the Bodie Juice Company. Yeah, it's cute. But I don't want to walk over there without my mask on. And I don't want to stop this video yet, but I will. Yeah. So I guess I'm just saying, watch for those seeds, watch for those moments where a seed takes root. And if it's not a seed you want, if you don't want to be irritated, you can't make yourself not irritated if you're irritated. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting. If you're irritated, but you can shine a light on that, and then if it's something you don't want and you feel really crappy, then you can turn your attention to the opposite thing, which is the thing that you do want, which is to not be irritated. And the way to become not irritated isn't always clear. But, I mean, I found it pretty quickly on this. Once I realized I was getting irritated, my way out was twofold. One was acknowledging that it was irritating me and not feeling guilty about that. And two was acknowledging that this is maybe too complicated and not useful for you, but the quick summary is acknowledging that my feelings had value too. So if somebody says that, like, I imagine that a lot of nice obligated feeling people watch this channel. Like, if you like being nice. And in that moment, if someone says, I'm being persnickety, and I also felt irritation, then it's okay, Jessica, to acknowledge that yes, I felt irritated, and yes, I agreed with their stance that they were being persnickety, and that maybe that's not the best alignment of two people, or two people's perspective, or two people's lives. I mean, maybe the answer then needs to be no. And thoughts like that used to make me feel so mean. If somebody said to me in the past, even just 1 year ago, or even just a few months ago, if someone said, I know I'm being persnickety, but my go-to thought was the thing you would say in person. The thing nice people say in person all the time when they don't even necessarily mean it. Like, no, you're not being persnickety. No, it's okay. Just because I like talking and I like communicating. And so that creates a person or a persona, i.e. me, who's always like an open book and an open blanket and an open door and an open table to every conversation and every weird emotional discrepancy being kind of sent my way. And not discrepancy, emotional nuance that doesn't, no offense to this person who sent me this email, but it doesn't value me. You know, if the person is valuing themselves enough to say, and here's my list of things, and I know they sound persnickety, then they acknowledged it. You don't have to negate that. They acknowledged that what they were listing was maybe a little bit persnickety and therefore maybe a little bit irritating. And then therefore you are allowed to feel irritated. You don't have to say it out loud to them. You don't have, it's like this weird thing that nice people do. We think that if someone says it out loud, I know I'm being persnickety, I'm going to stop saying that word, irritating. I know I'm being difficult. That's one that comes my way all the time to be helpful. You know, clients, people can be like, I know I'm being so difficult, or I know I did blah, 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 but. And then almost because they acknowledged it, you feel this weird guilt or obligation to say, no, don't worry about it, or yes, that's okay, and to be accommodating. In other words, a lot of nice people are accommodating people, but where do you think passive aggressiveness comes from? Sometimes, if you're a person who likes to be accommodating, people will ask you to accommodate them. And then what's your bottom? Like, how far is too far? So, even in my own mind, I have to remind myself that it's okay to agree with them when they say something like, not just that situation, but when they say something like, I know that I'm being difficult, or I know I'm asking a lot. Like, just in your own mind, just think, yes, they are. And they know it. Because the next step is then you're allowed to, if they even know that what they're asking is a little too much, or what they're asking is not considering you, and what's your value, and what's your needs, or place in the world, or perspective. If they know what they're asking isn't honoring you as an equal party, because maybe they can't. They can only see it through their lens. Then it's your job to say no if you feel no. And I know that's a cliche thing, so let me break it down. Like, it's your job to honor what you actually feel and either speak it out loud to them, or at the absolute flippin' very least, speak it inwardly to yourself. Because I know almost every nice person I've ever met, I swear they're confused on this issue, because I've been confused on this issue my whole life. It felt mean to even think boundaries, to even think no, when I knew they secretly really wanted me to say yes. Even if they were acknowledging the ways that they were being a bit of an extra challenge for me. It still just felt mean to even think, no, I won't accommodate this thing that you yourself are admitting is a challenge. And you can build a business off of that. And I'm not saying, oh my gosh, my clients are amazing and wonderful and I love them to pieces, but because I'm an accommodating person, they sometimes ask to be accommodated. And it's like, so you have to find what's your line. And it's not one line, it's usually multiple lines. Like, I've found multiple lines. I have lots of lines. One is like, you know, if you want to make a change really last minute, then you still have to pay me for my time or something like that. That's a client thing. And then I'm genuinely not frustrated. You know? It's like a doctor's office. You don't get to just make another appointment if you miss the one that you had scheduled and I already saved that time for you. So, or like a dance class, I could go even further and be like, it's a tuition and you just never get to make up the time. It's just if you miss the class, you miss the class. But I don't go that far because I feel like if there's enough notice, and since taking piano lessons or songwriting or pop music theory mentoring, like, it's such a year after year after year kind of thing that I like to be more flexible than that. Like, I actually enjoy being more flexible than that. So you have to find, I think, or at least this is what's worked for me, you have to find where's the line for you. Where do you feel comfortable being flexible, and where do you feel comfortable drawing a boundary or saying no? And it might change over the years. Mine has changed over the years. I used to never feel comfortable saying no. And I flippin' had to say yes to literally everything, or I felt like a mean person. And that's probably the summary of every like bad situation I ever got in my life. I was gonna say abusive, but people don't mean to take advantage of you. People just treat you the way you expect to be treated. And that's another cliche that I never understood before, but it's like, they're not doing it to be mean. They're just, I don't know. I think we attract what we actually want. Like, those were opportunities for me to realize I was a nice person every time I accommodated someone. And then I felt good about myself. So, like, I actually wanted those challenges thrown my way. I don't know. I'm gonna put my mask on and walk through this little strip of town, Washington Square. This street is called Washington. It runs all the way to downtown, through center town, and then to downtown. And over there is East Town. And that's where Third Coast Recording Company is, where Brian used to intern, and where a lot of really great people record albums. So, super tiny town, but actually pretty epic. There's a lot going on here. I love it. Anyway, bye!